Hello, I'm Herbie Deskins, Deputy Judge of Pike County. And back in November 8th, 2016, the people of Pike County voted in a new type of government, the commissioner form of government, by a vote of 11,566 to 8,587. And when I got the appointment as deputy judge, the judge asked me if I would to set up a program that would educate the people on our new type of government. And since the filing for elections and in the different districts is complete, we're going to start that education by a program detailing the commissioner form of government and telling you basically what it's about. And to help me out today, we have Rich Ornstein. He's an attorney at the Kentucky Association of Counties. He has got a JD degree from the University of Kentucky. His bachelor's degree was from the University of Louisville. He has practiced law with the Kentucky Department of Local Government from 1998 to 2007, and is currently working in his 11th year with the Kentucky Association of Counties. So Rich, thank you very much for coming up today to help out with our explanation of the commissioner form of government.
It's my pleasure, Herbie. Where do you want to start?
Well, let's start with we voted it in on November the 8th, and it's going to be implemented the 1st of January of 19. Tell us a little bit how many counties in Kentucky have the commissioner form of government.
Right now, come next year, it'll be 14 counties, counting Pike. I've got a map I think they're going to throw up here, which shows you where they're located. So I put together a map to kind of show you where the commission forms of government are. As you can see, most of the counties are magisterial form, as Pike County is now, and they're in the blue, the light blue. The counties in the gray are all the current commission forms. The dark blue are Louisville and Lexington, which are entities unto their own. Pike obviously is there on the eastern side in black. And then I did highlight Hardin and Clark, which we're going to talk about later, which are magisterial counties who each did one term as a commission form and then went back. But again, one of the things I think that's kind of a neat on the map, at least from a political junkie standpoint, is that you've noticed that a lot of the commission governments are clustered, whether it's far west Kentucky with, say, Grays, Marshall, and McCracken, or up north with Kenton, Campbell, and Boone. You can see up in the east you have two together. You have two more with Bath and Montgomery. Mason's not too far from those. Johnson, of course, is right near you all as well. So they're geographically spread pretty far across the Commonwealth from one side to the other.
Well, now, since the voters have voted in the commissioner form of government, how long is it in for sure?
One term for certain.
One term for certain. So it's going to be with us for 4 years.
You will have 4 years of commissioners no matter what happens.
And the statutes, I think, set out specifically how many commissioners you're going to have and how long their terms will be.
Correct. Sometimes folks get a bit confused because I believe in a city commission you have 4 members, 4 commissioners, but for a county commission you have 3 county commissioners, one from one of 3 districts.
Okay, and
or commission districts.
And then with the county judge executive, that's the fiscal court will be those 4, the county judge executive and the 3 commissioners.
Correct. You'll have 4 voting members on fiscal court.
Okay. Now, if something comes before the fiscal court, how many votes does it take to pass it, and does any one of the commissioners or the county judge have an extra vote should there be a tie?
You know, currently the county judge executive under the magisterial form has an extra vote on personnel matters. You have to wait 15 days, and he gets what's called the second vote. That's only for personnel. That that stays in existence with the commission form of government. Nothing there really changes. So, but only in personnel does he get the second vote. In general terms, quorum for a fiscal court of 4 is going to be 3. So you have to have 3 to do business. Ordinances, you're going to have 3 votes to pass. An order or a resolution would just take a majority of the quorum. So it could be 2 to 1 for a resolution, for example, or a motion.
Okay, so what if it's just a regular ordinance or a regular thing for the court to pass, and it ends up 2-2, 2 commissioners and one way, and the commissioner and the county judge the other? What happens there?
With the exception of personnel, ties die.
Okay.
And the same thing could happen now if one of the magistrates was absent, for example. You could have a 3-3 tie, and ties don't go forward.
Okay, so only in personnel does the county judge, executive, have an extra vote.
Correct. Correct.
Well, I think that's one of the things that I've been having questions on, and I thought that was the way it was, but I wanted to get an explanation of somebody that actually works every day with this. Now, what about the pay of the commissioners? I mean, the commissioners and the county judge.
Well, county judge is different. County judge is set by statute. Back in 1998, they passed the what's called House Bill 810. And House Bill 810 set the salary for the judge, the sheriff, the clerk, and the jailer. In those counties that have a full-service jail. So those are set by statute. Nothing changes there. Before the first Monday in May this year, fiscal court will set the salary for the commissioners. And that's ultimately their decision. Once that salary is set, it doesn't change during the 4 years of the term, except by the Consumer Price Index, which is like a COLA. For example, this year was 2%. The fiscal court members, the commissioners next year, could adopt the CPI, Consumer Price Index, not adopt it, but whatever the fiscal court sets this year by the first Monday in May will be basically the salary for the remainder of next term.
So the only way that a commissioner could get a raise is by the COLA or the consumer index.
That's correct.
During their term of office.
And that number is usually quite low.
Okay. Now, we have in Pike County here we've had the magistrate and the constable form. What's happened to that system that we used to have? And because I know that those offices are in the Constitution, what happened when we voted in the commissioner form of government to those offices?
Well, it's pretty simple, and I've got a PowerPoint here. I'm going to skip ahead. Okay, if you look on this slide, it pretty much tells you the biggest change, I think, from going from magisterial to commission, other than going to 3 commissioners, and of course the big change is how they're elected, is the impact on constables. Right now, and going forward, you always have 1 constable per magisterial district. When you switch to the commission form of government, by law, you go to 3 magisterial districts. The magisterial districts, the magistrates, are a constitutional position. You'll still elect them, they just have no real duties. But because you're going to have 3 magistrates, you now also have 3 constables. So the number of constables will go down just like the commissions. So it'll be 3.
So we'll have 3 magistrates and 3 constables.
Correct.
Now, what powers does the magistrate have?
Starting in January, the first Monday in January, which starts the term, they will have next to no power. They'll be able to perform wedding ceremonies with permission of the county judge, and that's basically it.
And they have to have permission of the county judge to perform these marriage ceremonies?
Correct.
And what about the constable?
Constables, their duties don't change. They're peace officers. They only have powers within the county, unlike a deputy sheriff, who's the sheriff, for example, his duties are coextensive with the Commonwealth of Kentucky, which means his powers can be exercised in other areas of the state, the same as his deputies. Constable only has powers within Pike County, but the only difference is you go from 6 to 3.
Now, the constable, the Constitution doesn't set any type of compensation, nor does the statute set any compensation for constables.
It sets a maximum The fiscal court, which controls the fiscal affairs of any county, whether you're under a magisterial or commission form, fiscal court will set the salary for themselves for the next term, as well as for the constables. If they pay the county attorney, they set the salary for that position as well. The maximum under the Constitution is $7,200, but that number goes back to 1949, and you apply the Consumer Price Index each year going forward. I think that number now, the maximum is in the 70s, 70 some odd thousand dollars. So fiscal court can set a salary for the commissioners for next term, for the constables for next term, up to that amount.
Then what are the duties of a constable?
Law enforcement.
And only in Pike County?
Yeah, they also have the ability to serve papers. Of course, a lot of people have the ability to serve papers, but only in Pike County. They are peace officers, so they have full peace officer powers.
And they don't have any power outside of Pike County to arrest or to serve papers?
Well, again, it depends on the type of papers.
Okay.
In law school, I served papers to make extra money, civil.
Yes, civil, okay.
But no, a constable can't go to Johnson County and make an arrest, whereas a deputy sheriff, Johnson County could ask Pike County for assistance. Pike County may then send some deputy sheriffs over to assist. That deputy sheriff would have law enforcement powers in Johnson. A constable doesn't have that ability.
Okay. Well, now, you said that the salaries should be set by May 1st. Does that preclude setting the salaries earlier?
No, the Constitution, or actually statute 64-530, I think it's sub 4, says you just have to set the salaries by the first Monday in May. The Constitution says you can't change the salaries during the term of office.
So whatever salary set will be there for the next 4 years?
Correct.
Now, in Kentucky, we have 120 counties.
Yes.
How many counties have adopted, that you have records of, recent records, have adopted the commissioner form of government, and then after 4 years went back to the magisterial type of government?
If we can go back to that map. Okay, if you'll notice in yellow you have 2 counties highlighted. Hardin to the west and Clark to the east. Again, both in yellow. Clark is the most recent. 2 terms ago, they went to commission form of government. They're currently back to being magisterial. Prior to that, the prior term, Hardin County had gone to a commission form of government, and then they also lasted 1 term and went back. And I think it's a good comparison. Clark County has a population of approximately 32,000. Hardin County is right close to 100, give or take. So it kind of gives, Pike County's kind of right there in the middle. And the biggest thing is, well, really, it was a little bit different how they both went about it. Hardin County held several forums before the election to go to a commission form of government. Clark County did very little as to educating their folks. The parties on either side that were interested did the education. In both cases, I believe the year following, maybe the first year of the commission term, petitions were put together just like they were for you all 2 years ago, and it went back to the ballot and reversed course.
But it still has to be 4 years after you put it in.
Correct.
Okay.
Once you're elected, you have the right to serve out your term of office.
Okay.
You know, Herbie, one of the things we talked about was the issue with representation and maybe why they chose to go back to a magisterial form from a commission form. And I think the biggest difference is in how folks are elected. In Pike County, because Pikeville has less than 8,000 people.
80,000.
Pikeville has less than 8,000 people.
Pike, okay.
Pikeville has less than 8,000 people because the estimates, I think, for Pike County now are around 62,000.
Yeah, right.
Because Pikeville has less than 8,000 people, the commissioners, when they run for the primary, will just run in their district. So if you're District 1, you only run in District 1. But when you go to the general election, you have to run countywide, just like the county judge, the sheriff, the clerk, the jailer, the county attorney. The problem with that, though, I think what occurred in Clark County and in Hardin County, it's just my opinion, based off what folks told me, is right now in Pike County, you have about 1 magistrate for every 10,000 people, population-wise. But when you have to run countywide in the general election, that commissioner in effect is going to represent 62,000 people. So when you have an issue with a road, or because of the rain we've been having, with a bridge washing out, it's hard to get hold of your commissioner, or harder to get hold of your commissioner perhaps than it would be to get hold of your magistrate, because one for 6,000 or one for 10,000 people versus one for 62,000 people.
Well, let's go to that. Let's see. We have a primary election,
Yes.
and the people that are running for commissioner have to live in one of the 3 districts, and that's where they run.
You have to live in the district that you're representing. So if you're running for District 1, you have to have resided in District 1.
And you have to reside in that district even the 4 years that you stay.
You have to reside in the district while you're serving, and for at least, I think it's 1 year prior to running.
Okay, so then in the fall election, you run countywide, is that correct?
Correct.
And then supposedly you then are a county official representing all the 62,000 people that live in the county.
You know, technically, you represent your district, but if 62,000 people get to vote for you, and I realize that number's high, children don't vote, some people aren't going to vote, but when you're running countywide, the reality is you're being elected and you're representing the entire county. Now, in some ways, that's probably good. You have a more of a county view of how government ought to be, rather than just a district view of finances and other things. The negative, though, is if you're used to be able to call in, or used to be able to call your magistrate, you can still call your commissioner, but there's only so many hours in the day for him to take those calls.
And what about the government underneath the fiscal court, the road department, the parks department, and all those departments? Is there anything set out in the statute as to how the statutes that you have to have that type of government? I mean, the outline of government.
You know, the way it's set up and the way it works in most counties is that all of those departments answer solely to the county judge. That fiscal court is here, same level as the judge. The judge is here, fiscal court's here, equal branches of government. But then everything else comes underneath the judge. In Pike County, because of the geographic size, I mean, I think you're the largest county in the state, you all have chosen to have road departments in each district. And that can still happen. Ultimately, it's what do those commissioners decide next year? What does the fiscal court decide next year?
But the new government will decide what type of government they will have under them. They're not bound by anything that had previously been made by the previous fiscal court. Is that correct?
I think that's correct. I mean, I think the biggest thing that folks have to understand is, other than how you're elected, there's really not a whole lot of difference, magisterial to commission form, as to the laws. You're elected into 3 districts instead of, in this case, 6, but everything else, for the most part, stays the same. The biggest issue is the election.
Okay. Now let's go to that so that there's no mistake about, you only run in the primary election, and you run partisan as a Democrat and Republican or an independent in the primary in the district in which you live.
Correct.
And then in the fall election, the person that got the highest amount of votes in that district and the Democrat ticket and the highest amount on the Republican ticket, and if there's an independent candidate, they run county-wide.
Yeah, the commissioners will run county-wide.
And then the whole court will meet with the county judge, and that is called the fiscal court.
That's correct.
And then under that, you have the justices of the peace, or the magistrates, and the constables. The magistrate has no statutory authority except in the marriage ceremonies, and the constable hasn't got any other than the statutory duties of the constable, or the constitutional duties.
The constable's duties will not change from where they are today.
Okay.
The same duties will apply. The magistrates, I live in Lexington, we elect magistrates. but they have very limited duties, pretty much marriage ceremonies.
So if you're mentioned in the Constitution, it's hard to take you out.
You know, we know that there have been constitutional positions where the statutory duties were taken away, such as with the magistrates coming up. But yeah, the magistrates will still get elected because they're still a constitutional office.
Okay. Well, I think that we've scanned over the qualifications to be a commissioner. Mm-hmm. Would you go over those again? Maybe if we have a.
I didn't. Since we'd already. At this point, everybody had already filed. I didn't bother bringing in the constitutional requirements. Of course, there is an age requirement. I believe they do have to live within their district for at least 1 year prior to the election.
That's mainly what I was
2 years in the Commonwealth. I'll be honest, I don't recall the age you have to be to serve. I didn't bother pulling that.
There's no educational requirements, though.
No. If you're not a felon, you've lived in the district, you've lived in the Commonwealth for the minimum time period, and you live within your district, you're good to go.
And the constable, there's no educational requirement on that?
With the few exceptions on the ballot, there are no education requirements. When I say education requirements, for example, you have to take a test to qualify to be PVA. But for the constitutional positions, no, there's no additional requirement.
Well, how often by the statutes does the fiscal court have to meet under the commissioner form of government?
Counties are required to meet monthly at a minimum. It used to be counties only met monthly. It's more often now that you see counties meeting at least twice a month. But again, that's ultimately a decision that this new fiscal court will make come next January.
So they have to meet at least once a month?
Yes.
And the budgetary process, is it the same thing as is under the magistrate and form of government?
Yes. Yes.
Your budget has to be in by July 1 every year?
Yeah, budget needs to be passed and in place by July 1 because your fiscal year is at July 1, June 30. That has not changed.
So actually, there's not very little difference in the way government operates under the commissioners and as in the magistrates.
There's almost no difference once they're seated come first Monday in January between what you have now and what you're going to have.
Well, Rich, we've covered it pretty well. Is there any other comment that you might want to make as to what we haven't covered about the commissioner form of government?
No, I mean, I think it's a good form of government. These counties that have had it for years and years, like I said, in Northern Kentucky or in Davis County or Johnson County, it works very well. No different than what you have now. It's purely a matter of how you want folks. How you want your elected officials to view the county. Under a commission form, you have a greater focus, I think your courts do, on the county as a whole versus a magisterial form of government where your greater focus, if you're a magistrate, is on your particular district. Again, I think it's one of those things that if the people get used to it, the commission form works great. If this were reversed, if this was Johnson County wanting to go the other way, I think it'd be the same issue. It's how long does it take your citizenry to get used to the change? Both forms of government work well. As we've discussed, we have small counties. Bath County has 12,000 people. They're a commission form of government. And then Kenton County has 160,000 people. They're also a commission form of government. So we know it works well. It's just a matter of what your people are used to and what they want.
Well, Rich, thank you very much for coming up from Frankfort today and discussing the magistrates and form of government and the commissioner's form of government. And for the people that are going to be living under it, we know we're going to have it for 4 years. Make a decision after that if we want to keep it or vote back in the magistrate form of government. And it is basically the same type of government as the magistrate form of government.
Correct.
Well, thank you very much. And people in Pike County, if you have any questions about this program, you can write me at the care of the county judge's office, and if there's any questions that you have that we haven't answered, feel free to set them out in writing, and I'll sure be glad to reply. Thank you very much.